Hello, my name's Alan Foom, and today I'm going to talk about how electrical vehicles may cut your CO2 emissions less than you think. We're going to use Norway as an example. Now, Norway is the world leader in electric vehicles, so evidenced by this chart here, different types of vehicles in Norway, so that's diesel, petrol, other, for example, hybrid vehicles and electric. So now electric vehicles are roughly 20% of the new cars, but their CO2 emissions haven't really gone down by very much per capita, and certainly less than their Nordic neighbours, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. So why is that, and what are the potential implications? So electric cars seem by many people as a way to drastically cut CO2 emissions, and there are mandates in several European countries that are planned that will phase out internal combustion vehicles. And electrical cars, apart from being technical marvels, also do produce significantly less other pollutants. So no nitrogen oxides, no sulfur oxides, no carbon monoxide, and a lot less in terms of particulates. There's still some from brake dust and tire debris, but a lot less. And we already have an example in Norway, which is the largest per capita EV market in 2021. 90% of new cars were battery electric vehicles, as well as nearly 20% of the total fleet. But Norwegian CO2 emissions per capita, although they have reduced a bit, they've reduced less than the Nordic neighbours, who have far fewer electric cars on their fleet. And Norwegian oil consumption, okay, it's declined a little bit, but again, far fewer than the Nordic neighbours. And all of these EV incentives cost a great deal. So are there better ways to decarbonise? Now, the automotive industry is in a state of flux. So described here in this little diagram, three-dimensional diagram. So we have at the moment, most cars are internal combustion engines. They're owned by the drivers and they're manually driven. Now, things are going to get more electric. So hybrid, range extender hybrid, and battery electrical vehicles at that far end member. Could get more autonomous from fully automatic, where there's no driver input, to also ownership, from being owned by the driver to being perhaps transportation as a service. Now, all of these things can happen. We don't know quite how they'll go about and what will happen next. So you can understand automotive industries in quite a state of flux. And there have been several predictions. So this is what an EV bias future can look like. So these are different forecasts from different consultancies, where red is internal combustion engines, light green is hybrids, then dark greens are plug-in electric hybrids, and then yellows are fully electrics, and blues are fuel cells. Now, hydrogen fuel cells haven't really taken off. That's a technology that seems to be, at the moment, a bit of a dead end. I don't know whether that will change. But if you look at some of these forecasts, they're not too dissimilar to what Norway's new car fleet was like in 2017. Norway's car fleet in 2021's even more electrified. So what does this mean, and how is it going to go? So Norway, marvelous country, beautiful place, really great people. So some famous Norwegians here, wonder if you can name them. And got a lot to offer and done a lot of positive things for the world. And one of the things they're leaders in is electric car adoption. So now you're nearly at 20% new cars are electric. And then of the 20% of the fleet is electric. And per capita, electric car consumption is a lot higher than other places around the world. So where's it going to go? But there's still quite a lot of older internal combustion engine cars in their fleet. So from a standing start to 90% over 10 years, battery electric car adoption, that is impressive. That is a revolution. And this has come at a cost. There have been a lot of incentives within Norway for electric car adoption. For example, there are no purchase import taxes. Norway doesn't have its own car industry, so everything's imported. There was quite a high rate of value-added tax or sales tax, 25%, doesn't apply to electric vehicles, a lower annual road tax. There are no charges for tolls or ferries, quite a big issue in Norway. Free municipal parking, access to bus lanes, company car reduction for people who have cars provided as part of their employment, and now exemptions of VAT on leasing. So basically, they really are incentivizing people. And here are some examples from 2019. of different cars. So this is looking at expensive cars, so an Audi A7 versus a Tesla Model S, and this is looking at a standard car, Volkswagen Golf versus Volkswagen e-Golf, and look at the relative prices. These are converted into dollars from Norwegian krona. So you can see the really high amount of disincentives of taxes on vehicles that have got internal combustion engines, and because of that, electric vehicles are noticeably cheaper. So frankly, if you're Norwegian, you'd be pretty nuts not to buy an EV from a financial point of view. So how important is transport as an overall share? So this is CO2 emissions by source in Europe. So red is industry. Then you got domestic, agriculture, energy related, both electricity and other energy. And then here you've got transport. So road transport is just about 12% of CO2 emissions. So if you're going to cut that, that's going to replace that. Okay, 12% cut, that's nice, but is it really going to get there? And if you look at emissions trends over time, emissions from industry, emissions from the energy sector have both declined, basically through to more efficiency and more decarbonization within the energy space. But transport went up to about the global financial crisis 2007 and then pretty much flatlined since then. So transport's an obvious place where people would want to do something about emissions. Okay, well, looking at transport emissions by different countries. This is a piece of work done by Damien Lehard. He looked at C-segment compact cars, so effectively something like a Volkswagen Golf or a Ford Focus, and a typical true life cycle emissions per kilometer, including all the building costs and everything else, for a petrol car is about 180. So if you're looking at Germany, you're looking at Britain, much of a muchness, 173, 174, similar. You're looking at decarbonized electricity countries, such as France, all nuclear, 90%, Switzerland, Austria, etc., have got quite a lot of hydro. You're looking at Sweden, half nuclear, half hydro, 80, Norway, 78. So it should be a place where something like Norway should be a place where electric cars would make sense. If you're looking at somewhere like Poland or Estonia, Poland has a very coal-based electricity system. Estonia is based on oil shales with commensurate CO2 emissions. It really doesn't make much sense in those countries until they decarbonize their electricity systems, assuming they do. Other thing to bear in mind is that modern cars take a long time. Well, why does everything take so long? Well, the average European car is 10 and a half years old. And modern cars have a 15 to 20 year lifespan. Now, if you own a BMW, brand new BMW, and you get a new one every 3 years, you may not realize that, but that BMW gets passed further down the food chain. Probably actually ends up in either Poland or Lithuania, who have unusually 17, 16-year-old cars as an average. USA has about 11 and a half, Europe is about 10 and a half, Norway's just over 10. Britain has about 8, and then Luxembourg and Belgium have the youngest cars on average. But cars last a long time, and people then pass them on down the food chain as they get a new car. So looking at CO2 emission trends, so this is where Norway's energy consumption is by different types. So oil and gas, electricity, and then other products. So manufacturing, again, heavily electricity based, but electricity is very low carbon in Norway. Transport, again, was at the time mainly oil based, so this is figures from 2015, and then other groups. So you can imagine this being an obvious place if you're Norwegian to cut, because you don't have any coal plants to shut. You don't have any. So if you want to cut emissions as Norway, this is where you were going to go. And how have they been doing? So this is looking at data from the BP review of World Energy, with World Bank for the per capita. So if you look at UK, 1990, 2000, 2010, 2018, steady decline, mainly due to the phase out of coal in power generation. Sweden, steady decline. Norway, not so much. Finland, again, a decline, and then Denmark, steady, and then a decline. So what's going on? If you look at oil consumption per capita, so this is in barrels of oil per day per million people. So if you look at Norway, initially went up to 2001 and then steady decline. Finland, steady decline. Sweden, steady decline. Denmark, Sweden, decline. All of these countries have reasonably substantial population growth, so we've taken that out by looking at per capita. If you look at everything indexed to 2000, so 100 equals to is 2000. Norway is 85% of 2000. Denmark 55%, so just over half. Finland 76, just over 3/4, and Sweden roughly 2/3. So again, substantial falls in the Nordic neighbours relative to what Norway has done, despite the electric cars. If you look at CO2 emissions, substantial declines in Finland, substantial declines in Denmark. Denmark, again, quite a lot of that is to do with decarbonisation of their electricity system, with all those wind turbines in the Danish North Sea. Norway, not so much. In 2000 they were substantially less than both Denmark and Finland. Now they're more than Denmark and almost as much as Finland. Sweden, again, has always had a relatively decarbonised system and has had a slow decline relative to everyone else. So when you put that into an index to 2000, so 2000 it was 100. Norway, 82%. Denmark, 44%. And both Finland and Sweden, roughly 59%. So again, Norway has had a substantially slower decline in CO2 per capita, despite all the electric cars during this period. Okay, you can see the declines maybe accelerated a little bit, but still, comparing to the Nordic neighbours, who have far fewer electric cars, they've done much better CO2 per capita reduction. If you look at Norway's CO2 emissions per sector, road transport, this bit in here, this is again statistics from the Norwegian government, is roughly 70 and a bit percent. Now, road transport also includes trucks, so not just cars. If you look at all these other factors, again, how much can you do that? And a substantial part of CO2 emissions in Norway is actually due to oil and gas extraction. Norway is Western Europe's largest oil and gas producer. It basically keeps your lights on. So, again, generates also a great deal of wealth for the Norwegian population. And if you look at Norway's electricity generation, it's virtually all hydro with a little bit of wind and solar. So fairly decarbonised. Can they go any further? Possibly, possibly not. So are there better ways to decarbonise electric vehicles? Now, electrical vehicles are a technical marvel. And they do slash urban pollution, slash nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, particulates, and they might reduce oil dependency a little bit, but as we've looked at that, it's maybe a little bit, not by that much at all. So CO2 emissions, obviously the effect depends on the source of electricity. If you're a coal-dependent country, like, for example, Poland or China or India, maybe that's not such a great idea. If you are a already decarbonised electricity sector country like Norway, it should be. But we haven't had any dramatic cuts in CO2 emissions or oil use yet. Now, there are better ways of decarbonising. Can we get more decarbonisation bang for our buck or our krona? Well, decarbonising electricity grids is obviously a good idea. Nuclear, hydro, geothermal, all of which are reliable. Less of a fan of wind and solar because of their intermittency. I'm a big fan of nuclear and hydro where that's possible. And can we have more efficient internal combustion engines with less consumption, less emissions, better driving, and the hybrids? Again, if a hybrid, if more of the fleet can be hybrids, that could be useful, particularly where they can be used in electric mode in urban environments to cut the NOx and SOx and particulates. Can we have clean industrial processes? Can we have more efficiency, more innovation? Let's think a little bit outside the box. Now, okay, having a shiny new Tesla is a way of saying I am very carbon neutral, but any CO2 emitted anywhere is emitted globally. Whether it's emitted in Beijing, whether it's emitted in Mumbai, whether it's emitted in Oslo, whether it's emitted in Rio de Janeiro or Lagos. So let's think broadly. Let's think holistically. So thank you very much. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next.